Welcome to Real Money Talks. Real strategies from the moneymakers and the world changers that you can use to make millions, keep those millions, multiply your wealth, and build your team. Here's your host, author of 5 New York Times bestsellers, money expert on Dr. Phil, CNN, CNBC, The Street TV, Fox News, and The View, Laurel Langmeyer.
Hi, this is Laurel, and welcome back to Laurel's Real Money Talks, a podcast that talks about how to make money, how to keep money, how to invest money, how to find a team and put it all together. And we interview every week just world-leading experts in different categories. And today we're talking about one of my favorite, which is cannabis. And we're going to talk about what's beyond the mainstream. You know, mainstream knows a lot about cannabis, not only from a use standpoint, but from a financial standpoint. And it's going to become one of the greatest asset classes I think our country and other countries have ever seen. So with me today, Joseph has been in the industry since he was a teenager. He's leading a huge project in Hawthorne, Nevada, and he's here with us today from Colorado. So Joseph, welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So just give a little, I kind of set up the background. You've been here, in this industry since you're a teenager, but, what makes you an expert to talk? So, this podcast goes all over the world, and I want people to know how extraordinary you are.
Yeah, no problem. I think it all starts with having great mentors. Cannabis is not something you can go to a university and learn about. You can scour the internet and dig through podcasts now more so. And back in the day, I'm 34 and I started experimenting. It's been in my life since I was 15, whether it was smoking it or attempting to grow it when I was 15. And when I was 15, almost 20 years ago, you really just had these forums. You could go scour through the forums. So there's a lot of misinformation in there and, anecdotal evidence. So now that there are a lot of professional, real businesses that have, a lot of overhead and they need to focus on the cost of the goods sold and all of these things that normal businesses use. And it's out of the black market and into the mainstream. It's become legitimized, right? So that brings research. It brings professionals from other walks of life, like agronomists, horticulture background, big biotech and whatnot. And we know a lot about the genome of cannabis. And cannabis, the species, it encompasses a lot of things. It's not just the THC-rich cannabis we know. Mm-hmm. And what really got me to the level I'm at is having great mentors, working under people. And then I took the step to work for myself. I started as a vendor with multiple different products like lighting, environmental controls, nutrient, integrated pest management, application, consulting, all these things, and also working under people in gardens that are licensed and regulated. And they have a lot of red tape and a lot of hoops you have to jump through and things you cannot do that you could do in the past, like spraying your crop with chemicals or reactive gardening where you see a bug and you spray for the bug and things like that, right? So now we have legitimized the industry. We have a lot of testing, and I was ahead of that curve, fortunately, with the pesticides. Yeah. And I have a scientific mind, right? My father is an engineer. My brother is an engineer, and I was the black sheep. I've always known that cannabis was special. I've been told my whole life I should stay away from it. It's bad. And in 2009, when I moved to Colorado to grow cannabis, I came up here with my now wife, and we wanted to do the caregiver thing, and it was very lucrative. And that was one of my big motivations, was coming up to Colorado to make money and create my own wealth. And then I quickly realized that there's so much medicinal benefit and people get a lot of relief and they have a more normal life with the medicinal side as for pain management, anxiety, depression, all these things, sleep problems. And then it really became about something else for me. It became about helping people. And as soon as I changed the way I looked at cannabis and realized it helps so many people, a lot of doors open for me. Just a lot of passion there and a lot of motivation.
So Joseph, talk about, like, again, beyond what the mainstream knows, right? So it's going to talk about the basics that, and you're headed there right now. I just want to, there's so many people who think that they know it, but let's talk about that.
Well, and to their defense, a lot of people just know what they're told, right? And this has all been in the shadows, this whole industry, for the longest time. And over the last 10 years or so, we've not only legitimized it, as I said, but understood it so much better. We understand it a lot better. And for me, it reaffirms a lot of what I already knew and didn't really have the evidence to back it up. It's just personal, anecdotal evidence, whatnot. So what the mainstream's not really talking about right now with cannabis, and that comes from a place of, we're up against big business, pharmaceutical industry, the plastic industry, oil and gas. We're a threat to them because they can take oil and make so many things with it that hemp and cannabis can also make. But when it comes to medicinal value and helping people and, for example, helping people stop smoking cigarettes or helping people avoid harmful painkillers or whether it be opiates or benzos, you have a lot of medicinal value there, and you can use cannabis regularly and get the same benefits without the side effects, right? So the side effects are pretty awful for opiates. And now that we have had cannabis in the mainstream and it can be talked about and people are exposed to it more, it's very common for places that have an opioid epidemic to introduce cannabis, and those numbers drastically drop because people can smoke or ingest cannabis, whether it be a tincture, a topical. I mean, you can take a topical loaded up with THC, put it on your skin and get high from it, for example. And I've personally done it, experimenting with lotions and salves. It's fascinating. And we know that there are over 450 compounds in these plants. And there are compounds that we can't identify. There are terpenes, the flavonoids, what has the aroma and the taste. We know that there are a lot of unidentified compounds just in that arena, right? That are classified as flavonoids and terpenes. So we have cannabinoids, THC, CBD, CBG, and there are many. And we're just learning about these things and the potency of them and how they all work synergistically with the terpenes. And one of the biggest things the mainstream is not talking about is that there were misconceptions before the legitimization of cannabis. One of those big things was the sativa indica conversation. Mm-hmm. Sativa generally was equatorial, large, long photo period, long flowering plants. Once they start flowering, they take, 16 to 20 weeks to finish. And indoor varieties take 7 to 8 weeks to finish. That's generally what everyone grows in the legal cannabis space for the sake of getting 4 or 5 harvests a year to meet those expenses and all the overhead and keep your numbers where they need to be. So your COGS change a lot when you have a 18-week variety, right? So with that being said, we now know that is not how they're classified because you have all this hybridized, everything's a hybrid, right? You take all these equatorial and these mountainous, the indica would be the other side. So you have, the Pakistan, Afghanistan, mountainous regions where you have these landlocked varieties that have not been interrupted by other cannabis varieties and cross-pollinated, or people have not, diminished that population or tainted it, right? So they're untouched. They're called landrace varieties. And we look at those landrace varieties from the equator and from these mountainous regions, and now they're all basically crossed together. You have, Thai varieties crossed with Afghan or Pakistan, and it's fascinating. Then additionally, you have feral hemp that produces almost no THC, that grows wild here in the United States, for example, and in Europe and Asia. And basically, the big thing that we know now is that it's not indica or sativa anymore. They classify it as narrow leaf or broadleaf variety, and then drug type. So drug type means the dominant compound like THC or CBD. Type 1 is THC rich with little to no other cannabinoids. And then type 2 is THC CBD. Then type 3 is CBD rich with less than 0.3% THC. That's hemp. And we can grow hemp for fiber or grain, or we can grow hemp for CBD oil. And those are all different. The oil for oil would be a sensi crop. So sensimilla, no seeds. Type 4 is CBG rich with less than 0.3% THC. And we know now that CBG varieties have the THC synthase that triggers the THC to produce in the plant is turned off with CBG. Type 5 is no cannabinoids. So you have all the other compounds I mentioned previously, like flavonoids, terpenes, and all these other unknown compounds that are in that plant. That's just how we classify it. And, these are all a combination of narrow leaf, broadleaf varieties to reach these traits, these chemotypes, we call them, which is the chemical makeup of the plant. Yep. That's how we classify it now. You have an observation-based classification, narrow leaf, broadleaf, which is changed from indica sativa. And then you have a drug type classification, which is chemotype.
Explain the drug type.
THC is a drug, yep. CBD is a drug, CBG is a drug. And that just really comes down to what that plant produces a majority of within it. And that's how we classify it, by the drug that it produces.
So, Joseph, as you speak of this, I love talking to you because I don't know anyone else who knows the depth that you know.
It's hard to put it all into words.
Oh, I know. But, earlier you said, the farmers are clearly going to get into the business. So as you look towards the future, what's going to be happening, how do you see the farmers getting involved? Because my concern are people like you, right, and those who really know the plant and know the benefits. When it goes pharma, isn't it going to get very synthetic? And, just what's the damage that you see in the future that's going to happen if farmers don't enter this industry properly?
Well, I love that question. So what I see is everybody's trying to find their place in the industry, whether it be your ag farmer who's, growing thousands of acres and it's fully mechanized, right? And the industry started out where outside you could grow CBD and it wouldn't get seeded, type 3. The Farm Bill kind of justified that. It gave us the ability to go outside and grow this stuff in the field. And 4 years ago, when I grew hemp for the first time in a field in Colorado, because it was legal here first to grow CBD hemp varieties type 3, as long as they don't produce 0.3% THC. And starting out, you could do it and it wouldn't get pollinated by your neighbors. Now, over the years, you have a lot of people that don't know what they're doing. They're experimenting, or they're just blatantly planting plants that produce pollen, and then they're pollinating all their neighbors, which brings down the CBD because you have all this seed in the flower. The female plants get pollinated and they produce seed. And when they're heavily seeded, the plant is mostly seed. So it doesn't produce that much CBD. There's not flower surface area. It's just all seed. And it's also stressful to the plant. So it's not going to produce for that reason as well. So what I see happening with the ag guys, there are things that we call it a tricrop. So these are varieties that produce more fiber. They also produce CBD around 3-4% in the flower, but they're more well equipped to be pollinated. So you also get grain. That's why we call it a tricrop. You have fiber, grain, and CBD. And you have to mechanize all this. Imagine 1,000 acres of plants full of seeds with a little bit of flower. You have to use all these machines to separate all those different parts, and then you can extract the compounds out the flower. There are a lot of different uses for the seed. The shell is where all the oil is. It's a very thin layer. It's got all the hemp seed oil in it, which is very, very nutritious high in omega-3s and 6s. It's very nutritionally sound. And then the hemp seed heart is full of protein, and you can use that. There's animal grade feed and then human grade. And they all have parameters that make them qualified for those different areas. And then you can also roast the seeds whole as well. So there's a lot of uses for them as food, for feed for animals. And then fiber is it's one of the strongest fibrous plants on the planet. And generally these fibers stay intact for, 16, 30, 40 inches. So that's very beneficial. And it was a staple in the United States for the longest time. World War II, we needed rope, and everybody was subsidized to grow hemp for the government so that we could go to war. And then it just vanished. They changed the laws. They made hemp illegal as well as cannabis. They classified it as Schedule 1, no medicinal benefit. We know that's not true now. We were kind of misled about that. And we don't need to go into the whole conspiracy side of that, but there's a lot of industry motivation from other people to make hemp and cannabis illegal. Mainly, we're talking about all this medicinal value from the compounds, the drug varieties that you can smoke or ingest, eat, put it in a tincture, and there's tons of medicinal value, all the relief you get. And now we've been so bombarded with these, they're all petrochemical pharmaceutical drugs. They have hundreds of thousands of compounds in a couple drops of oil. You take crude oil and you drop it in water, and the amount of compounds that we've identified in that is just insane. It's astronomical. So they take all these compounds and test them and put them in a pill, and they have benefit, but generally there are a lot of side effects, and they tend to be easy to abuse. They're addictive, especially opiates and barbiturates. So you now have this problem in society where drugs are very profitable to prescribe. You have these pain clinics all over the country, and those places with pain clinics usually have a lot more substance abuse issues. And we now know that cannabis relieves all of those cravings, and they help with addiction tremendously and withdrawals. You see in movies how bad it is when people are jonesing for these hard drugs. They're curled up in a ball, sweating in the bed, and cannabis helps with that tremendously. And that, I think, is one of the reasons that it is becoming so popular, because these people that develop addiction issues, they live with that for their whole life. Alcohol, pharmaceutical drugs, we know that as a fact. Addiction is a disease, and cannabis replaces that desire, that addiction, and you are functional. Your brain works perfectly. Your emotions aren't all over the place. You are relieved and less anxious and more relaxed. Those are facts. And the science is starting to catch up with all those things. And we're being able to prove these things because the medical industry is now kind of allowed to do it, right? Especially in Europe, and Israel is a big leader in this research. So that is really refreshing, because it's what I grew up racing motocross. And when I was 19, I dislocated my shoulder, broke my clavicle, had to have surgery. They gave me Valium, which is a barbiturate, and they gave me the strongest Vicodin they could give me. And I had an issue. It was very addictive. And if it wasn't for cannabis, I would still have that issue, I think, based on, my personality and how well I know myself. It would be a battle. And I go long periods of times without smoking cannabis, and I usually save it for the evening time. And I don't have a problem putting it down and picking it back up. And I never have those addiction problems with the pharmaceutical drugs that I was once addicted to. So I have personal experience. It justifies the whole thing for me. And, I still live with injuries, and I choose to use cannabis to help with those injuries. instead. I mean, I have a torn meniscus and ACL on my left leg, and I can live with it just fine. It limits me when I exercise, but this is a huge reason why cannabis has such a big future.
Just that whole last piece of the conversation, don't you agree that if the addiction and pain, I mean, the pain industry in the world is extremely high, is if it
is a huge industry.
Just focused on those two, if just focused on those two, addiction and pain, it would have a very different future, right? I mean, it's got a way bigger future than that.
That's why it has a different future than it has had in the past, because people are exposing themselves to it. They have more access to cannabis now because it's more legal, and they don't have to worry about getting cuffed in the back of a cop car for going to buy a bag of weed anymore. And you see state by state, they're lowering. And I mean, I'm from Texas, and don't get me wrong, I'm from the most liberal part of Texas, Austin. And they just announced in Austin that you can have 8 ounces of cannabis on you and they won't take you to jail. That's
wow.
Great. This is Texas.
That's huge.
Yeah. Same thing in Colorado. You can have 4 ounces on you, I believe. I might be wrong. And you can also have 6 plants growing at your home without any special licensing or being on a list or having any medical card or anything. Just as a citizen of Colorado, you can have 6 plants in your home growing. That's crazy to me.
So, Joseph, I could talk to you forever about this. So I have to wrap up the podcast, but talk a little, just if people want to know the information, because there's so much misinformation, right? I mean, anybody can put anything as, that's kind of my joke about the internet is it's like the bathroom wall. You can write anything about anybody at any time. So, I mean, where would you give a few sources for real accurate information to continue this conversation as industry and asset class continues to grow? Any sources that you think are more credible than others?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. In the United States, we have cannabis scheduled as Schedule 1. So in the government's eyes, it has no medicinal value. So it's been very difficult to study cannabis in the United States. And one of the leaders in this research is Israel. Israel has a giant CBD program. They have breeding programs. They have, research on these different compounds and how they work synergistically, namely with seizures. And that's exciting to me. I've watched children that are on a cocktail of over a dozen drugs, and they still have really, really bad seizures. And they take cannabis oil, and seizures, there's a lot of benefit from CBD, but you do need some THC, which further legitimizes cannabis as a whole. CBD has its place. Yes, there's tons of benefit, but CBD with some THC in children, that's kind of taboo. But when you're on 12 plus drugs and you still have seizures all the time, and you can't even look your parents in the face and make eye contact because your brain is so damaged from these seizures, we're giving life to these children, and I've seen it personally. I have a friend that makes a product with essential oils with THCA, THC, which is active, inactive. THCA is inactive. CBDA and CBD with essential oils, because a child that he treats is so badly ridden with seizures. He has 12 seizures a day. He can't open his mouth. He chokes on his tongue when his seizures kick in. They're so bad. He made a roller that you can put on the bottom of your feet, and I have video of this that I will share with you. I've seen it. Yo, I've
seen that one. Yeah, but it's extraordinary.
His seizure so bad that he's choking on his tongue, and his mom rolls this on the bottom of his feet, and his seizure stops in 10 seconds.
Yep.
It's fascinating. Well, and this research, what's backing this up is research in Israel. And I want to say it's Dr. Dimitri. I will get you more information. So Autumn Carsey, that is the project manager and designer on our project in Hawthorne, has gone to Israel and met with this doctor and spoke on panel.
That's awesome.
She's amazing. Let's get these listeners more information on that. I'll share some links.
Yep.
We can include them in the podcast. I don't want to misspeak. I'm not really great with pronouncing names from Israel, but let's get some more information. I'll compile some stuff for everyone and we can share it. and everyone can go down their own little rabbit hole.
Yep, I appreciate it. Joseph, this is one of many podcasts we're going to continue to do as we, keep tabs on this industry and what we're doing. And also, any of you that want to know about our project in Hawthorne, we're going to have one of the most extraordinary, high-grade, high-level projects Nevada's ever seen. So if you have questions, want to make a request, reach out to Joseph. If you have a question, there's several brands that I know Joseph's working on. I know my heart and soul in this is to really work with you to do the Mom's Meds brand, because I think there's so many, moms that need it for their children, just like the seizure. They need it for their parents, they need it for their kids, and they're not sure where to go. So right. I think that's just going to be a fun brand too. Yep. And I know you and your wife are well into it and have a beautiful child. So thank you so much for being on. And again, those of you that are here and listening, we will have Joseph back. Again, if you have any questions, make a request. Go to AskLaurel.com, AskLoral. Go to AskLaurel.com. You can make a request there. And as we publish the podcast notes, we will have links in there for you to get the proper education and accurate information. So Joseph, thank you. Appreciate your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And the rest of you will be back next week and more on how to make money, keep money, invest money, and do it with the team. If you enjoyed this podcast and these conversations, share it with those around you. We'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening to the Real Money Talks podcast. Your host has been Laurel Langmeyer, author of 5 New York Times bestsellers, money expert on Dr. Phil, CNN, CNBC, The Street TV, Fox News, and The View. Want to learn more about off-Wall Street investing, tax strategies, and multi-million-dollar business strategies? Visit liveoutloud.com/podcast for past episodes, show notes, and resources. For some special wealth-building gifts only for Laurel's podcast listeners, visit liveoutloud.com/podcast gifts. Do you have a burning question for Laurel? Visit AskLaurel.com to submit your question, and it may just be covered on a podcast episode. So stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to get new episodes every week.